Picture this: September 17th, 2025, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Cameras flashing, flags waving, pens clicking. Another ordinary diplomatic photo op, right? Wrong. Because what Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed that day wasn't just a defense pact, it was a geopolitical thunderclap. On the surface, the deal looked simple. Mutual defense agreements are nothing new. Countries sign them all the time, promising to protect each other like a high schooler swearing eternal friendship over milkshakes. But this one had a nuclear twist. For the first time, Pakistan openly suggested that its nuclear program, the crown jewel of its military might, could be extended to cover Saudi Arabia. Think about the weight of that sentence. A country with actual nuclear weapons, battle-tested in South Asia's most volatile rivalry, basically said, "Hey Riyadh, if anyone messes with you, our nukes have your back." That's not a handshake agreement. That's a thunderbolt across the global chessboard. This pact didn't appear out of thin air. It was the culmination of decades of cooperation between the two nations. Pakistan has long provided military support to the kingdom, training soldiers, sending troops, even guarding royal palaces. But this deal kicked things into overdrive. It formalized what had always been whispered in diplomatic back channels. If Saudi Arabia ever needed nuclear protection, Pakistan would deliver. And the timing, not an accident. With tensions simmering across the Middle East and power vacuums forming as global superpowers hesitate to get too involved, this pact signals a new era. Riyadh isn't just relying on Washington anymore. They've tapped Islamabad for their most powerful insurance policy yet, a guarantee that goes beyond oil, beyond money, and right into the heart of global security. But let's be real, this wasn't just about ink on paper. The real bombshell came when Pakistan described exactly what this pact means in practical terms. A nuclear umbrella, Middle East edition. So what exactly did Pakistan mean when it said Saudi Arabia now falls under its nuclear umbrella? Let's break it down without the diplomatic fluff. In plain English, Islamabad basically told Riyadh, if you get into serious trouble, our nukes are on standby for you. That's not a metaphor. It's a direct promise of nuclear protection. Defense Minister Khwaja Asif made the announcement bluntly, almost casually, like he was reading the weather. But the implications? Huge. For Saudi Arabia, it's like upgrading from an umbrella that breaks in the first gust of wind to one made out of reinforced titanium. A nuclear umbrella means that if Iran or any other adversary dares to threaten Saudi Arabia militarily, Pakistan's nuclear arsenal is part of the deterrent equation. Now, Saudi Arabia doesn't actually get to press the big red button. Pakistan isn't handing over warheads wrapped in gift paper. Instead, it's more like a mutual defense pact with teeth. Pakistan retains control, but Saudi gets the guarantee. And in international politics, perception is power. Even the rumor that Riyadh could call in nuclear protection shifts the balance of fear in the region. For decades, Saudi Arabia's defense strategy leaned heavily on American support: U.S. fighter jets, U.S. bases, U.S. guarantees. But Washington has been stepping back from Middle Eastern quagmires, leaving Riyadh hungry for new backers. Enter Pakistan, a longtime ally with not just manpower, but the ultimate trump card: nukes. To put it another way, Saudi Arabia just got an invisible force field. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but everyone in the neighborhood knows it's there. And that alone changes the game. But here's the kicker. This nuclear umbrella didn't come out of nowhere. It's the loudest chapter yet in a decades-long story of quiet military ties between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia.
If you think this nuclear umbrella deal came out of thin air, think again. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia didn't just wake up one morning and say, let's go nuclear together. This relationship has been simmering for decades, quietly stitched together with troops, training, and trust. Let's rewind. As far back as the 1960s and 70s, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan were building military connections that went beyond polite diplomatic visits. When Riyadh needed experienced soldiers to help train its fledgling forces, Pakistan stepped in. Thousands of Pakistani officers and troops were stationed in the kingdom, acting as instructors, advisors, and sometimes even bodyguards for the royal family. Fast forward to the 1980s, and the relationship got even tighter. During regional conflicts and Cold War chess games, Pakistani troops literally defended Saudi soil. The kingdom wasn't shy about leaning on Islamabad for security muscle. In return, Pakistan benefited from Saudi economic lifelines, cheap oil, loans, and the kind of financial assistance that kept its economy from going under more than once. Over the years, these ties became like muscle memory. Saudi Arabia knew Pakistan would show up when needed, and Pakistan knew Riyadh would keep the cash flowing. It wasn't just business, it was survival. And in the world of geopolitics, survival pacts often become the strongest bonds. So when Pakistan now says, sure, we'll extend our nuclear umbrella, it isn't a shocking leap. It's the logical next step in a relationship that's been tested and reinforced for half a century. The only difference? This time, the whispers went public, and the world is finally paying attention. But nothing shakes up a region like this kind of announcement. And you know who felt that tremor first? Iran, Saudi Arabia's favorite rival, and now its newest nuclear headache.
If there's one country that definitely didn't celebrate the Pakistan-Saudi Pact, it's Iran. You could practically hear the sound of teacups clattering in Tehran the moment Islamabad announced that Riyadh was now under its nuclear umbrella. Here's why. Iran and Saudi Arabia aren't just neighbors. They're rivals with capital R's, bold fonts, and flashing neon signs. They've clashed over oil prices, political influence, and religious leadership in the Muslim world. Their rivalry plays out everywhere: Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and even in proxy skirmishes that drag on for years. And now, Saudi Arabia has, at least symbolically, a nuclear card up its sleeve thanks to Pakistan. For Tehran, this changes the math overnight. Suddenly, it's not just about dealing with Saudi Arabia's petrodollars or U.S. fighter jets. It's about the possibility, however indirect, that Pakistan's nuclear arsenal could be part of the equation. That's like playing chess and realizing your opponent just borrowed the queen from another board. Even if Riyadh doesn't actually get nuclear warheads on its soil, the perception alone forces Iran to rethink its strategy. Deterrent works on psychology as much as hardware, and Iran knows that any aggressive move towards Saudi Arabia could trigger a Pakistani reaction. This pact also complicates Iran's balancing act with Pakistan itself. Historically, Islamabad has tried to keep relations with Tehran cordial, especially with shared borders and trade routes. But by publicly aligning its nuclear deterrence with Riyadh, Pakistan essentially picked a side. And if there's one thing Iran hates, it's feeling cornered. But Iran isn't the only one reaching for the aspirin, because whenever Pakistan so much as whispers the word nuclear, there's another neighbor that immediately sits up and pays attention: India. Whenever Pakistan mentions the word nuclear, you can bet your last rupee that India perks up like someone just rang a fire alarm, and with good reason. Pakistan didn't build its nuclear arsenal for fun, it built it with India in mind. Their rivalry is legendary, their wars numerous, and their standoffs so frequent that entire generations have grown up with tension at the border as a daily headline. So now imagine how New Delhi feels watching Islamabad extend its nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia. For India, this isn't just a Middle Eastern issue, it's a direct strategic headache. Because if Pakistan is willing to stretch its deterrence muscles abroad, what does that say about its posture closer to home? Think of it like this. You're already locked in a tense arm wrestling match, and suddenly your opponent shows off by flexing for another crowd across the room. It's not just intimidation, it's a message. I've got the strength to multitask. And that message won't sit well with India's military planners. India also has close ties with Saudi Arabia, particularly in trade and energy. Millions of Indian workers live and work in the kingdom. If Pakistan becomes Riyadh's nuclear guardian, New Delhi will worry that its own economic interests could be caught in the middle of a geopolitical tug-of-war. And let's not forget, India has its own budding partnership with Iran, the very rival Saudi Arabia wants to counterbalance. This triangle just got messier, and India knows it. But while India recalculates, there's another country quietly scribbling notes. It's not a rival, not exactly an ally, but definitely a player with skin in the game. Israel.
When Saudi Arabia gets anywhere near the word nuclear, Israel's ears perk up faster than a cat hearing a can opener. For decades, Tel Aviv's nightmare scenario has been a Middle East where its rivals either acquire nuclear weapons or get too cozy under someone else's umbrella. And now, that nightmare just got a fresh coat of paint. On paper, Israel and Saudi Arabia have been warming up to each other. Trade whispers, quiet security coordination, even diplomatic gestures that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. But let's be honest, friendship in the Middle East isn't built on trust, it's built on overlapping fears. And if Riyadh suddenly feels invincible under Pakistani's nuclear shadow, Israel knows that balance could shift in unpredictable ways. Think about it. Israel has long relied on its own undeclared but well-known nuclear capability as the ace up its sleeve. That deterrent works best when it's the only big stick in the room. But now, even if Saudi doesn't get its hands on actual warheads, just the perception of a Pakistani-backed nuclear shield changes the math. It gives Riyadh confidence, and confident rivals can be unpredictable. Here's the kicker. Israel doesn't even need to assume Saudi Arabia would ever use nukes. What worries them is leverage. A nuclear umbrella means Riyadh could negotiate harder, push further, or resist pressures it might otherwise cave to, and that makes Tel Aviv uneasy. So while the world fixates on Iran or India, Israel is quietly calculating in the background. Because in the Middle East, survival isn't just about who's armed, it's about who feels untouchable. And speaking of uneasy allies, there's one superpower that just did a double take, the United States. Because suddenly, Saudi Arabia has options Washington didn't approve.
If anyone in this saga has the right to feel awkward, it's the United States. For decades, America has been Saudi Arabia's big brother, bodyguard, and arms dealer rolled into one. U.S. bases dot the region, American fighter jets scream across Saudi skies, and billions in weapons sales have kept that relationship buzzing like a cash register at Christmas. But with Pakistan stepping in and offering Riyadh a nuclear umbrella, Washington suddenly looks replaceable. Let's be real, this isn't what the Pentagon likes to hear. America prides itself on being the default security guarantor in the Middle East. It's the geopolitical equivalent of saying, don't worry, we've got you covered. Now, Pakistan has basically swooped in and said, actually, we'll handle this part. And the timing couldn't be worse. In recent years, Washington has been trying to pivot away from Middle Eastern entanglements, focusing more on China, Russia, and the Indo-Pacific. That left Saudi Arabia feeling exposed, like someone whose bodyguard keeps stepping out for lunch breaks. Enter Pakistan sliding into the gap with a shiny nuclear guarantee. For U.S. policymakers, this isn't just about security, it's about prestige. If Saudi Arabia starts leaning more on Islamabad, it dilutes American influence in the region. Imagine hosting the party for decades, only to watch someone else grab the DJ booth. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. And here's the kicker. Washington can't exactly scold Riyadh. The U.S. needs Saudi oil, Saudi investments, and Saudi cooperation too much. So while the Pentagon frowns, the State Department smiles, and everyone quietly recalculates their playbook. But why would Pakistan take such a bold risk, knowing it could rattle both Iran and Washington? The answer is simple. Economics. So why would Pakistan take the risk of offering its nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia, knowing full well it could trigger global side-eyes from Washington, Tehran, and New Delhi? The answer isn't wrapped in ideology, it's wrapped in cash. Cold, hard, oil-soaked cash. Let's be honest, Pakistan's economy has been running on fumes. Inflation, brutal. Foreign reserves shrinking faster than an ice cube in the Karachi sun. Bailouts from the IMF keep the lights on, but it's hardly enough. Enter Saudi Arabia, the kingdom that has bailed Pakistan out more times than anyone cares to count. Loans, deferred oil payments, generous gifts of billions, all lifelines tossed Islamabad's way when bankruptcy seemed around the corner. So this nuclear umbrella isn't just geopolitics, it's economics dressed up in military uniform. By extending nuclear protection, Pakistan is effectively telling Riyadh, thanks for paying the bills. Consider this our version of a platinum loyalty card. And for Saudi Arabia, the return on investment is perfect. They get prestige, deterrence, and reassurance, while Pakistan secures continued access to financial lifelines, oil deals, and investments in infrastructure.
It's a win-win, wrapped in radioactive packaging. Here's the kicker. Pakistan has long balanced its foreign policy between loyalty to Saudi Arabia and cautious ties with other powers like China, the US, and even Iran. But when your economy is on the brink, loyalty is measured in dollars, not diplomacy. And right now, Riyadh is Islamabad's best bet for keeping the economy afloat. But while this deal makes sense for Pakistan's short-term survival, it throws a nuclear grenade into something much bigger, the global effort to stop the spread of nukes.
For decades, the world has tried to stop the spread of nuclear weapons like a parent hiding the cookie jar from sugar-crazed kids. Enter the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, the grand bargain where nuclear haves promised to disarm, eventually, while nuclear have-nots agreed not to build their own. Sounds nice, right? Well, here's the problem. Deals like the Pakistan-Saudi Pact make that treaty look about as useful as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Pakistan is not a signatory to the NPT, which already makes it an outsider in the global nuclear club. Now, by openly suggesting that its nuclear arsenal could extend protection to Saudi Arabia, Islamabad is kicking sand in the face of decades of carefully crafted non-proliferation norms. The message is clear. Nuclear protection is no longer an exclusive club. It's a service you can outsource, like ride-sharing, but with apocalyptic consequences. This is the nightmare scenario for Western capitals. If Saudi Arabia can get nuclear cover without building weapons, what's to stop other nations from cutting similar deals? Imagine a world where alliances become nuclear vending machines. The credibility of the NPT, already shaky, could collapse entirely. Even worse, rivals like Iran might feel compelled to double down on their own nuclear ambitions just to keep pace. And once the dominoes start falling, good luck putting them back in place. In short, this pact doesn't just shift regional dynamics, it shakes the very foundation of the global non-proliferation system. And once that trust is gone, rebuilding it will be almost impossible. Which brings us to the final and most important point. What does this all mean for the future of the Middle East and maybe the whole world? So what does all of this mean for the future? Short answer, buckle up, because the Middle East just strapped itself into a roller coaster with no seatbelts. The Pakistan-Saudi Defense Pact doesn't mean Riyadh suddenly has nuclear warheads parked in the desert, ready to launch at dawn. What it does mean is far more subtle and, in many ways, more powerful. Saudi Arabia now has the prestige and deterrence of being tied to an actual nuclear power, without the mess of secretly building its own arsenal. That alone changes how every rival, ally, and fence-sitter deals with the kingdom. Iran, more cautious. India, more alert. Israel, more calculating. Washington, more nervous. Everyone else, watching closely. The entire region's security architecture just tilted, and no one's entirely sure how far it will lean. For Pakistan, the move is both bold and risky. On one hand, it secures vital economic lifelines from Riyadh and cements decades of strategic trust. On the other, it risks alienating the US, straining ties with Iran, and adding fresh tension with India. In poker terms, Islamabad just went all in with a hand that could clean up the table or lose it all. The future then isn't about whether Saudi Arabia literally gains nukes. It's about perception, psychology, and power. A nuclear umbrella is like a shadow, intangible, but impossible to ignore. And in a region where symbolism carries as much weight as firepower, that shadow will loom large. So here's the big question. Did Pakistan just strengthen the Middle East or make it even more dangerous? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe for @GlobalPulse News, and stick around, because if this story proves anything, it's that geopolitics is never boring.